He'll get over her. He knows he will. He'll pretend his ship's not sinking. He'll tell himself he's over her because I'm the king of wishful thinking. Remember that magical song? Half of you are like, I don't think I was born. And that song was recorded. He sings about the promise of getting over heartbreak, and he knows that he's telling himself a lie. But he's going to continue to tell himself that lie and just say he'll get over her, he'll get over her. He knows that he will. Someday he'll get over her. And he tells himself because he knows that it's just wishful thinking. Some of you this morning, some of us are in wishful thinking mode in our faith. We're hoping what we have proclaimed and professed is true. We're just hoping. It's wishful thinking. I mean, it sounds too good to be true. This Jesus who died so many years ago, resurrected, great story. What does it have to do with me? And we're just, with wishful thinking, hoping that all the things that the preachers down through the years have told us are accurate. And when we go to God, when we lay out our despair before Him, we're just hoping that He will do something with it. And you see, when Luke, our author, wrote the Gospel of Luke that we're in today, he wrote it so that those who read it would have certainty concerning the things they've been taught. So not that they would have wishful thinking about all the things that might happen in their life, but so that they would have certainty concerning what they already knew. Most of us know at least a little bit of the story of the resurrection. Most of us know about this Jesus who died on a cross, the historical person who died on the cross, was placed in a grave, and then was said to be resurrected. Most of us know that, and most of us know that if you believe on Him, then you will be saved. And that's a really good message. It makes salvation super easy for you because Jesus did the heavy lifting. Faith in the Lord Jesus for salvation in eternity. That's a good deal, right? That's a good deal. But many of us then, when it comes rubber to road, when we're facing off with life, that truth of transformation tends to get pushed into the background against all the other pressures. Today, as we continue in the book of Luke, we are going to talk about resurrection, but maybe not where you expect us to talk about resurrection. If you have a Bible, if you have it on your app, if you have it in your lap, turn to Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8, we're going to pick up with this story in verse 40, and we're going to meet two women, a woman and a girl, who were in a really desperate situation. The girl was facing death. The woman had had an issue of bleeding for 12 years and couldn't get anything done to accomplish her healing. She had been literally bled dry financially. We meet two people at the edge. Maybe they're at the edge like you're at the edge. And even if you're not today at the edge, you know what it's like to be at the edge. When you have the demons before you and the cliff behind you, and you're confident there's just no way out. Maybe you're sitting here today and you're thinking to yourself, it doesn't matter what this guy says, there's nothing that's going to change how I am, the problems that I have, and the despair that I feel. Some of you, that's your promise to yourself today. And if it weren't for resurrection, I would say you're dead on right. But when you can pull death into life, there's always opportunity. There's always promise and hope. Last week, for those of you who are with us, we saw how Jesus deploys His divine strategy, rarely resorting to this divine drama, the big miraculous works that he does, but his works tend to be more subtle, more strategic. They're just as big of work, but they're kind of under the surface, where if a casual viewer sees them, they just write them off and explain them away as coincidence. And yet Jesus is working this strategy. So now when we pick up in Luke chapter 8 and verse 40, Jesus comes back from being on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. He returns where he came from, and he's going to find all these people waiting for him. Today, what I want us to focus on, what I want us to do, is anticipate redemption through our faith practice in Jesus. It's one thing to hope life gets better, that Jesus will just show up and do some divine things and make life get better. It's another thing to walk daily in the certainty that Jesus is producing redemption in our life. It's a whole different orientation of life to show up on a Sunday and expect that God will speak to you versus showing up on Sunday and hoping you get a good sermon. Right? It's a different attitude. If you show up and say, God's going to talk to me today, that's a different kind of anticipation. I want you to know something. We were always, through faith in Jesus, supposed to anticipate redemption in our daily lives, and finally, when we pass. So let's look at this story. Verse 40, chapter 8, verse 40 of Luke. Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue, and falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house. For he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. And as Jesus went, the people pressed around him. The word here, pressed, crushed in on him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him, that is, behind Jesus, and touched the fringe of his garment. And immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" And when everybody denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowd surrounds you and are crushing in on you." And I want to pause our reading for just a second to get the picture and to orient ourselves to this passage. There's two things that tell us we're dealing with two historically individual women, but one narrative event. Okay, so Jairus' daughter and the woman with the bleeding issue is the same narrative event. You can't divide them up. So you have to take them as a whole. That means that when we take them as a whole, we need to see the difference between what happens to these two people. On the one hand, you have Jairus, who is a ruler of the synagogue. This was a thing, like a position that a lay person in a synagogue, a Jewish synagogue, would hold. It had certain responsibilities. Most synagogues in that day had a ruler of the synagogue. He was generally responsible for the offerings that were made, for the giving of alms, for going to the bank, all that kind of stuff. He was like the chief layperson administrator that aided the rabbi. He was the guy who unlocked the doors. He was like our Randy around here. All right, he was everywhere, took care of the house kind of deal. He was that kind of guy. And so everybody knew this guy, and everybody knew his authority, and he comes up and very publicly, remember the crowd's waiting for him, he comes up and very publicly, he throws himself at Jesus' feet. Interesting, that's also what the demoniac did on the other side of the sea. He throws himself at Jesus' feet, and he implores Jesus to come with him because he has a 12-year-old, that's important, a 12-year-old daughter who's dying. As he's going along, the crowds swarm in on Jesus. You can see, you can feel that situation. All right, some of you introverts in the crowd, everybody's sitting way too close right now. Right? You can imagine all these people, knowing that Jesus heals, reaching out to touch him. And then it says that this woman comes alongside, and notice she has had this issue of blood for 12 years. Look, there's nothing significant about the number 12, but there is something significant about the connection. It's a 12-year-old girl and a woman with an issue for 12 years. You know why he gives us this number? He doesn't have to give us this number. Why do we care how old the girl is? It doesn't tell us anything theologically, but what it does do is it connects these two women together, meaning to say how God works in one and how God works in the other have a tie together in the narrative. All right, you catch it? That's what's significant. So it's not about you're going to have to suffer for 12 years before you get your healing. None of that. It just means that these two women, their fates with Jesus are intricately tied together. And so notice, she came up behind him. She sneaks in. She touches the fringe of his garment, meaning, unlike the rest who are crushing in on Jesus, this is a stealth attack. She sneaks up. She touches the fringe of his garment. She vanishes into the crowd. Jesus experiences something, stops everything. Jairus, come on, my daughter's dying. We got to get there. Stops everything, and he says, hold on. Somebody touched me. It's Simon Peter. Simon Peter, who's been clearing the way, pushing through. Nobody confesses up. The woman, feeling conspicuous now, but hiding in the crowd. She knows the jig is up. And Peter eventually says, Lord, hey, there's a lot of people touching you. You can see, Jesus now. I don't think he was angry, but he was definitely in charge, and everybody just kind of gives him some room. The woman, verse 46, Jesus said, someone touched me, for I perceive the power has gone out from me. And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. You catch that? It's a beautiful story, right? But I want to remind you of something. She stole her healing. She stole it. Did you catch that? I looked through the scripture. There are two other occasions, other than this one, there's two other occasions where there was perhaps unintentional healing. One is where Paul's garments were taken to sick people, and by touching them, they were made well. That's in Acts. And then there's another where Peter's shadow falls on people, and they were healed because his shadow falls on them, also in the book of Acts. But even in both of those, there seems to be some intentionality to heal. That is, that's what he was doing. I can't imagine that every other person that's in that crowd trying to touch Jesus wasn't sick. Right? And yet this woman, in her stealth attack to extract a healing, she stands as maybe the only example of an unintended healing. Jesus didn't look for her at first. Jesus wasn't like, where's that woman? I'm looking for that woman with the bleeding issue. Anybody seen the woman with the bleeding issue? Jesus didn't even know who it was who had actually touched him. You catch that? Totally in the dark. She had already been healed, but he's totally in the dark until she fesses up. You're like, why is he making such a big deal out of this? I mean, okay. Let's continue our story. While he was still speaking, verse 49, someone from the ruler's house came and said, this is Jairus' house, came and said, your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore. But Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, do not fear, only believe, and she will be well. And when he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and mother of the child. And all were weeping and mourning for her. But he said, do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, Child, arise. And her spirit returned, and she got up at once. And he directed that something should be given her to eat. And her parents were amazed, but he charged them to tell no one what had happened. This is an interesting couple of stories. In one case, a woman sought secrecy but needed the healing. In the other one, they weren't concerned about secrecy, but the healing was kept secret. Did you catch that? You see, the Lord works in both of these ways and even seems to provide something of a cover story for those doubters outside. You notice in verse 52, they're all weeping and mourning. So they find out that she's dead, and all the family begins to cry. They had this one last hope, and before things got better, things got a whole lot worse. They thought she was out of reach of any kind of healing. And by the way, when you die, you are out of reach of healing, but you're not out of reach of the Lord, because the Lord brings life from death. And so they thought it was over. They laugh at him, verse 53, they laugh at him. Actually, I don't think this is scoffing so much as, because you notice this, the next phrase, because they knew she was dead. You're like, no, I guess you're confused. She's dead. But Jesus says she's sleeping. The Apostle Paul uses this euphemism for death and talks about sleeping. It certainly was common in that day. Jesus doesn't lie, but he seems to give something of a cover story because he's about to resurrect this girl in secret. So in one who wants to be secret, he doesn't allow it. In the other who doesn't care about publicity, he keeps it secret. You catch the difference? They're tied together by the fact that they're by the 12. So he's telling us, Luke is telling us, these go together. In both cases, here's what we see. We see the urging to faith, but it's faith in two different ways. The reality, however, is that faith in Jesus leads one place. Faith in Jesus leads to resurrection. That's where it's all going. When you believe on Christ, faith in Jesus leads to resurrection. So whether you're more like the woman or you're more like the girl, the reality is when you get involved with Jesus, the result is always going to be resurrection. Every day is going to be a work toward resurrection. That's the big deal. Because even if you didn't die, I imagine, so I'm a little sore today. We had a big cross builder event on Friday. And I find that soreness when I was a young man lasted 3 days. Soreness as a 40-something-year-old man lasts eternally. Right? It just doesn't go away. You have little hang-ups everywhere in the body. And the beautiful thing is, even if the Lord returns before you die, you'll still be looking for resurrection. Some of you, your whole life is scheduled around your doctor's visits. You're thinking next week, you're like, well, with Good Friday and the doctor's office being closed, I've got double up appointments next week to go to. So it's going to be a busy week. You ain't got nothing to do except go to doctor's offices. And so increasingly, we long for the transformation work that Jesus does. Okay, so let me give you an example of this, of how the Lord seems to work. In mathematics, Don't worry, well, we're not getting that deep, all right. If you graph an equation, you can perform on the whole equation something called a transformation. And when you perform the transformation function on the whole equation that's graphed, it begins to change the whole thing. So you can turn the graph, you can zoom in or zoom out, you can change the maximum and the minimum, and you can do all of this using the exact same data that you had, but by performing the transformation, you can see it in a different way. All right, now hang with me. Your life is right here. At this moment, it's 11:16 a.m. Whatever's going on is going on. Some of you are happy about the things going on, and some of you are sad about the things going on, and some of you are looking with great anxiety about the things that are about to happen. And you're thinking in your mind, especially if you're a little bit older, you're like, this is just how it is. This is how I am. I've tried to change. I've tried to do better. I've tried to fix things, but it's just where I'm at. Some of you young people, you're looking at your future and you're like, man, I really want to do that, but I'm just not that. And you're wondering, what would it take for something to change? Well, listen, when the Lord works and what resurrection does, just the fact of resurrection to come, not even the fact that you go through it after death, but just the fact of resurrection, what it does is it produces a transformation event on the same reality that you're currently in. It allows this reality to be a moment-by-moment redemptive work of Jesus. You see, without resurrection, you're just going to die. That's where you're headed. With resurrection, that's a new function that's been introduced into your whole life, and it makes this situation you're in now completely different. So here you have the woman who steals her healing and the girl who goes ahead and dies. And in both cases, they have had to get a lot worse before they got a lot better. We see, in fact, two strategies for our faith. Number one, sometimes our faith pulls God's agenda into action. It pulls God's agenda into action. You see this with the woman with the issue. She believed that Jesus would heal her. She didn't expose who she was, and she pulls God's will into action in her life. Sometimes you have to begin believing that the Lord wants to work and anticipating redemption, and when you do that, then life changes. You get to a despair place, you get to a broken place, and your faith then pulls God's agenda into action. You know the Stanley Quencher tumbler, right? Stanley Quencher tumblers were released to the market in 2016. Some of you weren't born by then. But they didn't get really hot, like Duke It Out and Target kind of hot, until 2023. That's a long time. You know how they got hot? It's basically a pull strategy. There's some social media influencers that brought those gigantic tumblers that don't fit in any car holds. I don't know why. Anyway, I'm just going to say only a woman would love the Stanley Quencher tumbler because it's completely non-functional. Ladies, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Leave me alone. Don't send me an email. Just mostly kidding. It's an example of a pull marketing strategy where you got your product and nobody really knows about it. But you find a way to influence, and then people go looking for it, and as they go looking for it, they can't find it. So at one point, you could find some special crazy dainty color on eBay for like $250. You know why it was $250? Because somebody would pay it. It was a pull strategy. So now Stanley, that had been around for a long time and had these tumblers probably, like they didn't sell very well, they're just gathering dust on the shelves, and all of a sudden, they got to boost their production and get more and more and more in the market. Right? That's a pull strategy. And sometimes our faith pulls on the Lord. All right, here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that at any time we ever manipulate God. All right, here's the pagan interpretation of this. The pagan interpretation of this passage is, if you believe God for it, He will do it. That's the pagan interpretation. You know what's pagan? Because it relies on wishful thinking. It relies generally on some kind of offering you make. All right, so I'm going to give my 10th today so God will give me tenfold back. That's pagan. You make an offering to appease the gods. The gods come along and give you much. And God is never manipulated. Jesus is not manipulated in this situation by this woman, even if the healing seems to be unintentional. Jesus is, as we find in Luke, completely in charge of everything. In this case, the woman's faith has driven her to this place because it's exactly the place she needs to be, exactly to teach us this lesson about how faith functions. You see, here's her line of thought. She despaired. She pursued a healing. And then she pursued, and then she believed that Jesus was the one. She acted on that belief, and then she's publicly awarded a new life. All right, so let's get it in your space. You've despaired, and life in your despair has come from somewhere better and gone to somewhere worse. You've despaired. And you're here today because maybe you've decided to pursue an answer. And you think maybe Jesus has this answer for you. So you've pursued, and now you're at this place. You're at the place of belief. Am I going to believe God is one who responds to me reaching out? And we'll find out if you act on that. But when she acted, she was then publicly awarded a new life. And Jesus tells her to go in peace. It's interesting, in both of these occasions, Jesus touches these people, or in her case, she touched Jesus. And what that would have done in a Jewish legal system is commuted impurity, uncleanness onto Jesus. So literally, this woman is like Typhoid Mary. She goes through the crowd, touches all these people. They're all ceremonially unclean now because she's wiggled in among them. She touches Jesus. That would have made him unable to go to the temple and offer sacrifices in that day. But instead of defiling Jesus, Jesus purifies her. Do you catch how that works? And so he reaches out and she purifies him. And then she gets maybe the better part of all of this. She gets a personal encounter with the Lord Jesus. And likewise is the same for the girl. The little 12-year-old then suffers. She gets worse. You notice it's told from Jairus' standpoint, from her father's standpoint. And before things get better, Jesus in verse 48, this is not incidental, says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." And so then the next passage is this guy coming up to Jairus and saying, "Your daughter is dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore." You catch that? Because the faith that she showed to proactively pull God's agenda into action now becomes a different strategy, a faith that Jairus needs to anticipate the fulfillment of God's promises made to him. We come at our faith life from two ways. We have to believe that God is working and will work in the future. No matter where you're at in your life, I tell you what, you don't get married because you know the marriage is going to work out. You get married because you hope the marriage works out. Because you decide that you're going to put the energy and the effort into it. Listen, that doesn't always happen, right? It doesn't always happen that the marriage works out, but you didn't start out thinking, oh, this is going to be a total disaster. If you thought it was a total disaster, you would have waved off. And in that regard, you are practicing a pull strategy, saying, this is what I hope to happen, so I'm going to work toward it. And at other times, you're up against it, and life has gone from bad to worse. You are at the end, and what you need is confidence that the Lord can get a win in any case. Listen, some of you are here because you're Dallas Cowboys fans. You have wishful thinking for a good season coming up. I don't know if the Lord roots for the Dallas Cowboys or not. Probably not. But the winds that the Lord will bring, whether they are things you need to be confident He's doing in your future, or whether there are things that you need to be confident about because they're His promises, the winds that He is bringing will come to you through faith in His work. Here's what Jairus experienced. Jairus despaired. He pursued the Lord, right? He was racing against time, he thought. He pursued the Lord. He acted on that pursuit. This is the man who can get it done. He threw himself at Jesus' feet, and he said, "You've got to come with me. You've got to come with me, because if you don't, my daughter's going to die," right? That's what he says. But then when his daughter did die, he doubts. Why? Because he doesn't believe in resurrection. Guys, I want to tell you, the Lord's intention in your life is not to give you the good life now and to fix all the problems, but to give you the courage to walk with Him through any difficulty. Because the Lord's agenda takes you through the fire. It doesn't take you around the fire. The Lord's agenda takes you to hard places because they're hard. The Lord's agenda will take you into difficult situations. I mean, ask Jesus how it worked out. And yet, faith in Jesus always leads to resurrection. It changes the purpose and the meaning and the reality of your current situation. So let me ask this question. What kind of faith in Jesus are you needing today? Right? You're in one of a couple of places. You're either looking and you're saying, I need to pull God's agenda into action in my life. I need God to do something. And I need to act on it. So listen, I'm telling you, the message of Christ is simple. That by grace you're saved through faith. This is a gift of God, not the result of works, so that no one may boast. So literally Jesus walks by right now. In the telling of His story, He walks by right now. And some of you, what you need to do is presume on Him for that salvation. You need to reach out and touch the garment. It's not going to just happen to you. You're going to have to reach and grab hold and say, I believe in Jesus, and He will give you that eternal life. Some of you have slidden back in your work, and you're like, look, God has not worked on my behalf, and I don't know that He ever will. And so I'm not sure that all of this is true. Some of you are going to need to take up your courage and reach out then again to the Lord, trusting that His goodness will redeem. You need to get on a new path in life. And others of us, we're really anxious. You know, I think social anxiety keeps more people out of church today than non-belief. Well, I know some of you had to gut it out to get in here. You feel a little bit of that anxiety being around people. And, I know social anxiety keeps people out of church. And you're anxious about what might happen. And because you're anxious about what might happen, you miss out on what God will deliver and do. You see, Jairus could have been like, Jesus, never mind. She's dead. What could possibly... I mean, that relationship is dead. Maybe you're in that spot. It's dead. That person might as well be dead. They're never going to change. That situation, I'm just going to deal with it because it's always going to be there. My heart, my brokenness, my trauma, my background, it's always there, and nothing can ever fix it. And Jesus says to us, do not fear, only believe, and you can be well. Some of you just need to believe that the promises that God has already made. You see, Jesus was already on the way with Jairus. He had already committed to do it. You think Jesus was caught off guard and like, oh, she died. I didn't know it was so soon. Jesus stopped for the woman, at least because death just wasn't that big a deal. And folks, I'm just asking you, what kind of faith in Jesus are you needing today? That which anticipates and pulls, or that which believes in promises already made? You're in one of those categories, and you need to believe and act on it today. You're not too broken. Don't worry about that. Some of you got here, and you felt the ceiling shudder a little bit. You figured God was surprised you showed up in His house today. I want to tell you something. God was not surprised. God was waiting for you. He was waiting for you so that He could do a resurrection work in your life and take you to redemption. Some of you facing real difficulty next week, you know that you're going to hit it like a grinder. And the change of the game is you anticipating redemption. So I'm going to ask for a response today. An action where you step forward and you say, I'm going to trust Jesus in whatever this is. I'm going to trust Jesus in that situation because He's promised to do a work, or because I'm desperate and He's got to show up where nothing else good can happen in my life. Will you bring your stuff to the Lord? Stand with me. The team's going to return.